without further ado, I would like to introduce Lauren Hood. Lauren is the founder of Deep Dive Detroit, an organization that aims to create a safe space for uncomfortable conversations between disparate groups. Currently, Lauren is the acting director of Live 6, where she is responsible for executing corridor development strategy on the Livernois 6 Mile Corridor. Please join me in welcoming Lauren Hood.
Thank you. That was so formal, Ben. I'm going to try and loosen it up and make it informal. I always kind of prepare what I'm going to say, then I never use it. So just winging it here. It's not like I haven't done it before. So I'll just talk a little bit about how I got into doing community work. I think motivations are important as we think about community-based projects. We may have an idea that we project to the world about why we want to do this kind of work, but if we're really honest with ourselves about why we're doing it, there might be a different answer. So I'm going to do a lot of question asking and trying to get people engaged in critical thinking around this kind of stuff. I'll just give a little bit of background. I get kind of nervous when I first start talking, so I'm going to walk back and forth for a minute and then I'll just get into it. So I was born and raised on the northwest side of Detroit at an intersection of Pinehurst and Margarita, if anybody knows where that is. You do? Where my Northwest Detroiters at? Okay. So I grew up in that neighborhood. It was, I would say, 90% black, mostly middle class, 2 working parents and some kids. Very well maintained. There were businesses in our commercial corridor. Just like the closest thing to Black Pleasantville that you could have for like a middle class Detroit neighborhood. But I also went to a private school, so I had this black experience at home and then this kind of completely white experience. I went to Country Day in Birmingham for grade school and then Mercy for high school, which was a little more colorful, but not super. So if you can imagine, I've always had these 2 kinds of existence. So one, this all-black world, and then another, this an all-black world with it was safe and it was warm and supportive and thriving, but it was still, in comparison to this all-white world with all this wealth and all this opportunity, it was very different. So I've always been straddling these 2 worlds. And I feel like that's how I came up with the organization I started called Deep Dive Detroit, because I was always in the middle of these conversations. So I'd be at school where kids would be talking about, ooh, the city's bad, the city's dirty, it's dangerous, I don't know how you live down there. I'd be like, no, you have to spend time in the city's really great, the people are resilient, come on down. And then when I'm back at home, it's like, oh, those people out there, they don't really understand what we go through. The suburbs full of terrible people, it's bad, I don't even know how you do that every day. So I've always been straddling these 2 worlds and trying to advocate on behalf of whoever wasn't in the conversation. So I was like, okay. And a bunch of people started asking me to do it kind of professionally. Can you facilitate this dialogue between this group and this group? I was like, all right, that sounds like a business. So I just started doing it more and more. I'm like, oh, now there's a fee attached and it's some structure and it's my company now. But so the kinds of clients I've gotten is usually groups of fellows. I feel like you need to learn your lane. My lane is kind of young millennials for some reason. I don't know why, but those are the kinds of groups that are like, yes, we need a Lauren facilitated conversation. So that's my lane. I did actually do the Skillman Foundation staff once, but that's not my typical group of people. That's a little intimidating when people that deal with equity issues and community development on a larger scale ask you to come in and facilitate a dialogue for their staff. I was like, don't y'all know this already? And for the most part, they did, but there was just an issue that they wanted to unearth and they wanted an outsider to bring it up. So that's how that came about. And it's kind of how I got into community development. So for undergrad, I went to U of D. It was just U of D, no mercy at the time. I studied business. No mercy. But no mercy and no mercy. So I went for business. I wanted to be a music mogul, so I was interning at record labels, and I did an internship in New York. I thought that was going to be my thing. Kind of got into event marketing after that. It was really fun. Made a lot of money, met a lot of cool people, went to a lot of cool events, hung out backstage. But at some point I was just I need to do something that's a little more rewarding, because at the end of the day I would just look around and be like, okay, now what? That was really fun, but what do we really do? So that led me into doing community development. I was in Chicago for a little while doing some event marketing. I heard about the Masters of Community Development program at U of D. I investigated it. I was like, that sounds like a really good program. So it was kind of trajectory changing for me. I'm like, oh, you can actually make a living and help out your community. So it's rewarding, like on the outside, like it makes you money, but it also makes you feel good and you're being productive and useful. So also what led me to it was I saw what was going on in Detroit, and I noticed that a lot of people at the table didn't look like me. That's a really frustrating thing. You're like, all these changes are happening, there are all these decisions being made, there's all these money and resources being thrown at rebuilding Detroit neighborhoods, but when you look around the table, the people that are making decisions is nobody that's directly impacted by having had an experience in a Detroit neighborhood. I can't implore enough how frustrating that was. People at these tables would have all these questions about why is this like this, why is this like this. I'm like, you gotta ask some people that have been there for a long time. But what happens is, I think community knowledge isn't as highly valued as like institutional knowledge. So like when I say institutional, I mean like college. So the person in the room that has the master's in urban planning gets way more airtime than the person who I call it like a neighborhood PhD or a community PhD. So technically on the map, the neighborhood I grew up in is Bagley. So I have a Bagley PhD because I was there for like 40 years, right? But me not coming to the table with my school education, nobody really wants to listen to what I say. Or you listen in like a superficial way, like, oh, we have some community people here. Are you ready to talk, community person? And they're engaged in a very like superficial way. And usually it's only one or two people. So if you can imagine, there's a table of like 30 people working on a community project, and then you've got one or two people from the community, and they're like, okay, tell us what the community thinks. Like, it's really, like, you're kind of tokenized. And I don't know if you've ever been in that situation. Like I have, and now I'm really comfortable like speaking out against that kind of situation. But when I first started, I was very much like, oh, this is weird. I have some things that I want to say, and they're not doing this right, and it's uncomfortable. But I would just like, keep my head down and kind of be in the background. And I'd be like, this is wrong. You need to go get this person, this person, and this person. Every time you talk to this community, it's the same 5 people. Like I can do that stuff now, but back in the day, I didn't feel comfortable doing that. So, yeah, that's kind of how I arrived at this. And whenever I get a platform, I'm always trying to advocate for more native Detroiters being at the table, because there's just something to having that kind of personal experience with a neighborhood. I don't know how to describe it. It's like you treat it like Peace Corps, like a science fair project if you're working on a community project and you're not from a community that struggles in that way, and you can be like, you can keep it distant. You're at 30,000 square feet still when you're talking about that community, and it feels different to you than if you came up there and it means something to you to watch it come back. So that's why I do community development, and I get called to do community engagement because I speak institution, I speak white people, I speak foundation. So this makes me a valuable player in all these kinds of situations. But I try to make sure that I use my platform for good. It would be useless if I'm sitting at the table just smiling and nodding all the time. I have to push back, which is really hard again when you're that 1 or 2 people in the room and you're like, no. So what you risk is like losing the seat at the table, but what good is the seat at the table if you can't use it to make real change happen? So recognize that whenever there are community people at these decision-making tables, we are always struggling with that internal battle. I guess what I wanted to ask of you all is, so I kind of told you how I ended up doing community work. Why did all of you decide to come to a workshop on community engagement? Like, not everybody, but if somebody wants to share, like, what made you come? Chase.
So, today was my last day at my law firm. I've practiced real estate and corporate law for 8 years. And I just launched a nonprofit called Building Community Value, which is seeking to redevelop commercial corridors, much like Lauren is doing. And the reason that I wanted to do it is I've spent 8 years helping developers and large corporations in downtown, midtown, down here make lots of money. And being a native Detroiter, it felt very odd not to see that same development happening in the neighborhood. Like, I grew up on the west side as well, seeing development in those neighborhoods as well. So my goal is to use the knowledge that, luckily I've been fortunate to have over the course of these 8 years to implement some structures in the neighborhoods and try to get things moving in spaces that, that make me feel good.
Other people want to share. It doesn't have to be as baller as Chase. But still, like, I feel like everybody's reasoning is valid.
I'm here for you, Lauren.
So hi, I'm Brian. I only moved here around 6 months ago from California. So I'm here largely to learn about Detroit because I am that outsider. And I have a good amount of experience working in communities back in California, and I think that outsider perspective or native perspective is very interesting. Within Detroit, I've gotten involved with the Michigan Science Center and other educational profits and nonprofits, and that's my background. And I think community outreach is something that is sometimes overlooked a lot in that museum kind of space. So really just here to learn.
That's tough. Like that word outreach I've stopped using lately because it implies that there's like a thing going on and you have to reach out to the community. Like the thing should just be inclusive. You shouldn't have to be like, okay, now let's reach out. If you're already in the community, you should already been talking to people.
Museum's even a tough word on its own.
True. Yes.
Born and raised here, matter of fact, in my neighbor in the same area, Northwest Detroit. And I left many years, went to California, I went to Osaka, Japan. My job and my life took me all over. So I left my city, which I loved. So I eventually raised my family, and I says, okay, we're going back to Detroit, to my hometown, so I could show you guys what it's all about. And then when I got here, I'm like, what the hell happened? You know, where's what the hell happened? Was there a war and nobody told me? So I came back and I started looking for people that I knew and situations and communities and organizations that were there, and they were no longer there. So I one day I said to myself, I says, because I have to, I'm showing my family, which is my roots. My roots. So instead of trying to organize something, finding someone, I started communicating in the community that I've known. And it brought me further and further away. The next thing you know, I wound up at the Green of Detroit. And I started working there in urban agriculture, which I'm a farmer at heart anyways. But I was given an opportunity for a position of community relations. So when I first got the job, it is, like Lauren said, I was outreaching and let's get to the grassroots, and it was all of this kind of conversation that I was like, okay, I don't understand. Let's just do what we're supposed to do. Let's find the resources, and let's, if we don't have them, let's take a look and find out what we can do, and let's see what we can do to rebuild the city. So after 4 years of doing that, finally they just, backed off and said, let's let her loose because she's not going to act right. So, just let her do her thing. So I was able to do my thing, as you would say. I don't like titles, people say, who are you? I'm Imani, that's who I am, and I'm a native of Detroit. And I welcome all people because I've been on this planet long enough to know that I call all people, whether you're from California or what, if you've decided to make this your home, eventually you're a native Detroiter as well. And this is the most diverse city that you've ever seen in your life, actually, because there's all kinds of folks here with all kinds of ideas. So that's the reason I decided to come or stay community. How do you put it?
Others?
I've been in Detroit a month, and I'm from Ireland, and I'm a landscape architect, and I've been traveling for last year, and I've actually moved to Portland first, and I was there for about 3 weeks, and I was just like, no, and got in the car and I drove across, and now I'm living in an attic on West Grand Boulevard, and the guy whose house I'm living in, we're like gonna try start a community project across the road from his house. And yeah, it's been a bit of a strange month trying to go out and meet people and see what the city's about and how am I meant to do this, because I've never done anything like that before, but yeah.
Interesting. So what do people think of when they hear the word community? Like, I had to officially look up the definition so that I could talk about it. Like, because I feel like when we have these discussions in Detroit about let's engage the community, like there's an image that popped into everybody's head, right? Mm-hmm. What did he or she look like?
Brown.
Mm-hmm. Right, like why is that though? Like technically, if I'm remembering correctly, the definition of community was just a group of people that share a common geography or some common characteristics. Like, that's everybody in here. But like, why, when you're like, let's reach the community in Detroit, why did Ms. Jenkins pop into everybody's head? That's what I call her. Why is that the thing? And I feel like we need more Ms. Jenkinses at the table. I'm trying to advocate hard for her to get a seat at the table, but there shouldn't be just one. There should be like 3 seats reserved for Ms. Jenkins so she can feel empowered with her other homies. But let me see. So I wrote down some best practices. Oh, a tip that somebody gave me recently was, if you are ever in a position where you need to facilitate a community dialogue, let the person who has lived in the neighborhood the longest do the talking first and for the longest. Like, that never happens. Usually when there's like a meeting convened, it's like the people that are running it are just like, rah, 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 rah. And let's hear a little bit from this person who's been here for like 45 years. Let's hear a lot of it from the person that's been there for 45 years and a little bit about this thing you're trying to do in this neighborhood right now. Because usually what happens is, once people start to do real listening to the community, your whole idea of what you went there to do changes. Because you went in there without a lot of information about what the real problem was. So we're bringing with us a lot of ideas about what we think a place should be like. And I feel like that's where Detroit is right now. People are coming from all these places like, oh, the neighborhood I lived at in Portland had this, and this in it. That's what this neighborhood in Detroit needs. Like, that is not what those people want or need. And they can still be happy and thriving and successful without the coffee shop or the whatever you're trying to imprint on it. Like, yeah, so there's just different things have different value to different groups of people. So the things that you think make a good community might not be what the people here think makes a solid community. So you need to do more listening than talking, I think, and asking lots of questions. But not like you're trying to, again, do a science fair project and extract information. You're like trying to engage. You're trying to make a connection. Another thing, a key thing to point out about doing community engagement is it takes a long time. It's really disingenuous to just be like, okay, I got this grant, this project is gonna last this long, I'm gonna engage the community for this portion of it. Like, why would you do that? That's really not impactful. If you wanna really engage a community, like, A, you might wanna consider living there. B, but like start engaging people because they're people and you wanna build some connections and make some lasting relationships. But like, stick around after your grant runs out and your project is over because you give a shit. Like, that should be why people do community work, because you actually want to see the people there improve their quality of life or improve the landscape or create economic opportunity. But it's really like based and you care about the experience that the people are having. So engage the people in a lasting manner. Let me see. So there are 3 examples of how people typically do community engagement. So information happens a lot where a group comes into a community and they're just doing a one-way thing like I'm doing right this second, but not the whole thing. But when you stand there and you're just like, this is what we're going to do, this is what we think you need, and this is how we're going to do it, peace. That's it. That's information. The next way, consultation. So it's a 2-way relationship where the people leading the conversation give some information and then request feedback from the community. So that one seems a little bit more legit, and I think that's what we see most of the time, but people are calling that engagement. It's not. I think this is the most meaningful way to do it. Active participation is a collaboration where citizens actively shape policy options, but where the controlling entity is responsible for final decisions. So I think that's where we can get at maybe the most equitable that we can come to, because I feel like we're still in a state where the people that control the resources will have the final say. We want to change who controls the resources eventually, but while we're in this space, I think the best that we can do is have some kind of active engagement where the feedback is actually incorporated. Because a lot of times what happens is people give feedback and they take some notes and then it just goes away. You want to be able to report back to the people that you're engaging. Okay, you said this last time, Mary, and that's how we got incorporated back into this, and that's how it looks different based on what you said. Like, that's some genuine engagement. Just taking notes on what people said and then putting it in a file called community engagement doesn't really help anybody. So I think those are key things to remember. What else? Oh, visit people in their comfort zone. So most of these people are making an assumption, but you probably feel all comfortable in downtown, midtown, and it's cool in maybe certain neighborhoods. But if you're trying to do a community project in a certain community, don't have your meeting down here. That's not cool. Whatever kind of ties you have to people with their buildings and their properties, and it's really easy, go have the meeting in the neighborhood that you're trying to do the work in. Show that you're like genuinely committed. Like, and spend some time there. Just walk the streets there. Soak it all in. It's super easy, like low-hanging fruit, but people act like, give me some tips on like how to get close to some people. I'm like, what would you want people to do for you in your community? Just come hang out, talk to you, do some listening, like be in the space. And again, don't think of it as something that's outside of you, like I'm going to engage some community members. Just be like, I'm about to meet some people. Like I'm going to meet some other people. And you know what I mean? We're going to make some connections. It shouldn't be so like, there's a community member now. What is that? That's so weird. Like we're all part of some community. Just like make some connections and talk to some people. Language is important. I really hate when people that have community projects hold charrettes. Like that's cool. Like you're an urban planner or a design thinker. Like words like charrette like resonate with you. But if you really want to get people in the community to show up, be like, we're just going to have a community meeting, we're going to get together and talk about this thing, not be like, we're going to have a charrette and then use a bunch of different designy terms. We're going to talk about neighborhood typology, like what is that? Like I had a conference call today and I'm like, you can't use typology with the neighborhood. Not that the neighborhood is stupid and doesn't get it, but you want to speak in a language that's common to everybody and not just like people that study design thinking. So be conscious about your knowledge. Do your outreach in a lot of different ways. So it's really low-hanging fruit to like go on Facebook and be like, I made an event page and I invited everybody. If people don't show up, oh well. Like that's good for a certain group of people, but you really need to hit people from a bunch of different ways. So some things that we've heard in my Live Night 6 Mile work, there's one lady Denise Richards, who runs the Princeton Street Block Club, texts everybody when it's time for her block club to meet. She just sends out a group text. It's really kind of annoying because there are like 10 people in that text and you get like 10 responses after she sends it. But it's really effective for her and her block club members because a lot of them have flip phones. They don't have smartphones. They don't have Facebook accounts. So the way to reach all the people is to send that group text. A lot of people are homebound. So be thinking about like the senior citizen that doesn't do the texting or the Facebook but still has some valuable contributions. So everybody doesn't have the capacity to do it, but if you can, go see some people at their houses or designate a person in a particular geography, like on the block, to be like, hey, can you go talk to Ms. Jenkins who can't leave the house and see what she thinks about this? There are creative ways to do it, and it takes more time, but it's so much more substantial. Well, this is probably a key to success in anything that you do. Be self-aware. Again, it comes back to like knowing why you want to do something. It's really cool to be like, I'm doing this community work because I really want to help people. Like, is that really why you're doing this? Or is there something else? Like, and it's fine if there's the something else. It doesn't matter. No one should be judging you for why you do what you do. But I think it kind of is the frame through which you see the work and you take action. So everybody really needs to be honest with themselves about why they're here. Because I feel like a lot of the conflicts that come up with people that are working collectively on community projects, there are people that are really in it for the betterment of that place or for that group of people, but they're sitting across the table from some people that, you know, just want a platform, just want to be out there. So when you have those kinds of people all thinking that they're doing it for the same reason, but aren't, like heads butt all the time, it's really hard to make progress in that way. Let's see. I guess those are kind of the key points that I wanted to get out there. I also, I've been forgetting to talk about race a lot lately. So in Detroit in particular, as we talk about doing community development, you can't really understand how to move forward unless you understand how we got here. So please do some research about our racial history. Like I said, I'm one of those safe black people, so my white friends always ask me, new white friends, not the old ones because they already know, but new white friends are like, why are black people here so mad? Like, like, and there's really no short answer, and like just them asking that question makes me mad, so it's hard to like, they're like, see, I told you. But, I mean, it's something like people of color in Detroit, we kind of deal with it. It's like in our knapsack of issues that we just carry around and forget about. And we talk about it amongst ourselves all the time. Maybe it's a good thing to just ask your brown friend, like, what happened here? Why does the tension exist? How can we help disseminate some of that tension? But really do some research on our history and know why that vacant building is vacant and has been that way for 20 years. It's not because people stopped giving a shit, and it's not because somebody got mad and left, or Pookie and them came and took over the neighborhood. There's a reason that all those things happened, and a lot of them are structural and not the fault of any one or two individuals. So do that history, do that research, ask some questions, and don't be afraid. There should be, I feel like I get asked all the time to like mediate these conversations. I'm like, it's a conversation, just go have it. But people are so afraid of being offensive, being offended, looking stupid, I don't know, putting their cards on the table and being vulnerable. Just let go of all of that. And if you really want to do this work, you have to come at it from a whole different perspective. So be vulnerable, be honest, let yourself be criticized. Like, doing work like this, I don't know, requires different kinds of approaches, and you have to be comfortable being criticized. There are people that are going to say you're not being inclusive enough, you aren't trying hard enough, you're not out there enough. Be okay with that. Just let that criticism help you do the job better next time. Don't immediately get defensive about it. I see people do that all the time and spend like half of a work group session like defending their platform. I'm like, that's brain power we could have put on this project where we're trying to help people. So just don't get caught up in that. Just stay focused on what the actual mission and vision is.